Awesome. Thanks, guys. I think we actually have the appropriate title name this time, the very broad, very broad question of what's next in K-12. So we have an awesome group of panelists. But maybe because this is pretty packed, I'd love to just ask the audience with a show of hands quickly, where you all come from. So buy-side investors? Okay. Educators? Operators? Awesome, we've got a good smattering, which is incredible. And that's helpful for us as we sit on this end. We have 33 minutes left, so this will be pretty fast and furious. But super excited to have the folks that we have today. Maybe just for context, if we could quickly go down our row of panelists, if you don't mind just saying who you are, the organization that you represent, and a tweet-length statement of what you all do, that would be awesome. Adrian, please.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Adrian Ridner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Study.com. And we open the door to the life-changing impact of education for over 30 million learners and educators on the platform every month.
Hi, I got stuck in the elevator. So, sorry. My name is Bethlam Forsa, and I'm the CEO of Savvas Learning Company. Savvas is the largest K-12 instructional solution provider that meets the need of all students. We are focused in delivering K-12 instructional solution, including dual enrollment, CTE, etc. And we are in more than 90% of districts, and we serve in more than 125 countries.
Nice. Hi, everyone. I am Ankit, CEO and co-founder of Quizizz. Quizizz is a learning platform that is trusted by teachers in 90% of the schools in the US, but we also support, teachers in 100+ countries. Quizizz allows a teacher to, really deliver personalized instruction, leveraging the power of AI, and I'm really excited to be in this panel with everyone.
My name is James Rhyu. I'm the CEO of Stride. We run K-12 programs, virtual programs. We pioneered the space over 20 years ago. We now have over 200,000 kids run through our programs every year, and in primarily the virtual space, we've expanded into career learning and adult education over the past several years.
Awesome. Everybody hear me? Okay, I'll speak really loudly. So across K-12, there are all these huge themes that we hear, right? Learning loss is something that's come up and is very meaningful in the last few years. Teachers and districts continue to be really stressed for employment time. We talk about how to think about incorporating AI. Okay, we'll get to there. We talk about how to actually think about efficacy the right way. How do we think about leveraging all the technology that's available? There's a lot of challenges there. And all of our panelists, I think, come from this from a very different perspective for each of you. But maybe the question, for you all, would love to hear what you individually think is the biggest challenge facing K-12 and how you guys are thinking about solving it. I'll start with James on the other side, just to keep it fresh.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest, at least for me personally, the biggest challenge in K-12 education is thinking about the customer. And if you think about the way we have approached K-12 education for 200 years, it's actually not customer first. And if you think about the customer, which is primarily, first and foremost, the student, the parents, the teachers. And if you think about it in that paradigm, and you're really building your products and services around the framework of what's best for your customer, then I think actually some of these questions that I think we'll get into maybe a little bit today, like how do we use AI, actually become a little bit easier because we know that students are using AI. So what are our customers telling us? We know that the predominance of teachers have tried to use AI. We haven't trained them well to do it, but we know they have an interest in it. So if we listen to our customers, I think that's really the key, and I think that's actually what K-12 education has largely lacked.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about directly serving the customer at Stride, right? And you've got a broader, as every year goes by, you get a broader base. But how do you think about remaining just totally customer-centric and focused as you think about delivering better product, better services, helping them?
Yeah, we're not really in a unique situation in the sense that, this year we'll have over 200,000 students sort of come onto our platform. And the diversity of that student body is pretty massive. And I think most school districts have a huge diversity among their student body. We have growing populations of special needs kids. We have growing population of advanced learners. We have growing population of kids who want to learn skills and trades. We have, so we have this hugely diverse population. And I think we all believe that trying to find ways to meet customers at their point of need, to figure out what those students need and try to deliver that to them is going to be the key. I don't think that's a new concept, by the way, but I do think it's a struggle to figure out how to do that. Most of our programs are online, and I think that gives us an advantage because I think online, just like in almost any other consumer experience you have, it's easier to tailor the consumer experience to the needs of the customer online, whether it's banking or shopping or entertainment or whatever it is. And so I think just by dint of the fact that our programs are online, we are going to have a little bit of an easier time meeting that individualized need of the customer. And so a lot of what we invest in and a lot of what our programs are trying to do is in fact allow for that customized experience for the student that is harder for, say, in general, a district to do just because of the way they're constructed.
Can I just touch on that for a second? So, but I think it's a good point, but I beg the question of like, why? So why have we not focused on the student or the learner? And I think you have to go then to a systems problem of, if you think about K-12 and academia more broadly, it hasn't really evolved as much as one would expect. You're saying you're often, online. We do as well, but the reality is most K-12 kids today are educated in a system and a forum that is very similar in a lot of ways to the way it has been for hundreds of years in terms, not saying a lot of educators are not innovative, but they're within a slow-moving system that they're having to innovate within to serve those students. And I think the key is that's all well and nice, but we have to figure out how to enable and bring into that system the innovation to help the student, to help the learners, to listen to the needs of all the stakeholders in there, because it's not, it's not just listening to the student and the parents. That's very important. But if you can't figure out how to deploy it in a way that educators and the whole system is going to adopt it and move at maybe a slightly better pace, we're not going to get anywhere. So like you have to get to the root of the problem, and it's a very large-scale systems problem. But I agree. I think the issue is the customer in this case is not the direct buyer in the K-12 system. Often is an indirect buyer, and the incentives sometimes are not aligned, and we have to work better to align them and align to outcomes and real outcomes, no outcomes that get you, funding, but actual outcomes for the students.
Bethlam, I'm going to kick it to you because you are very entrenched in a lot of that. You have great reach into a lot of the school districts, as you mentioned. And along the lines of what James and Adrian are saying, it's how do you help districts do a better job of being focused? And it's not to say that districts don't have their own problems and their own pressures that they're facing, which is one of the challenges in K-12, but would love to hear from the Savvas side how you're thinking about helping down to the customer, the teacher, the learner, do a better job and be more efficient and do more with less.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So for us, it really starts with, first and foremost, with delivering high quality, efficacy-based instructional solution. Because at the end of the day, particularly right now where there is so much unaddressed learning loss, that we still have to close those gaps. On average, kids are still behind somewhere in math and in reading, still 6 months or so behind. Even though there has been some gains, we still are behind about a third a third in math and about a quarter in reading. So for us, it's really first and foremost is to deliver a high-quality instructional solution and provide them with the ability to get insight about students, so data-driven, highly personalized instruction. So to that extent, what we're doing is really talking about in terms of the system is, so we do things like, for example, interoperability is very important because there is a lot of different systems that are at play here. So, Savvas has one of the far-reaching platform Realize. So what we focused on is creating, plug and play interoperability across like 24 of the most used educational tools by educators. So providing them, going back to the notion of the usage and ease of use. So, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, we gotta provide educators with high quality instructional solution, insight around the students. Where are students in their learning journey? So data-driven instruction, and then give them the tools and capability to address the need of every child. We're all different, we all learn differently, and then being able to provide them with the pathways to address that need.
It's a great point, and I'm going to kick it to you in a second, Ankit. I think one of the challenges that we have with the traditional model that I think everyone has touched upon is that it has traditionally been very good at serving the center of the curve, right? It's the easiest place to be. Materials are geared towards that, and we understand how it's evolved there. But as we're increasingly seeing, there is more identification of how do you serve the accelerated learner? How do you serve the special needs learner? How do you serve, and even just the stigma of being identified in a lot of ways is rolling off as parents and teachers and students are self-identifying and saying this traditional model doesn't work for me, right? And so Ankit, I'd love you to just share a little bit about how you think about, whether it's personalization, whether it's teaching to the tails, serving non-traditional, right, in a very broad sense of learners.
So I think, at least at Quizizz, the way we look at things is that we want to keep that teacher at the center and be at the driver's seat. And we all know in that class there, it's just the reality of the system that you have to, given the time constraint, you end up teaching at the center. But as the technology has been progressing, I think there's this unique opportunity that has come about where first time I believe there's an opportunity for a teacher to truly personalize and reach to each and every student. And there's this, I would even break that personalization into multiple facets. I think there's this one part on just reaching to different kids at different levels, but then we touched upon the special ed. Today, it's more than 15% of the students end up being in that category. And how do you empower that teacher so that they can reach to these kids, but then also don't make these kids left behind? So to approach that at Quizizz, we recently launched this, I would say, one-in-a-kind system on accommodation profile, where a teacher could really identify a certain set of students, and based on their learning levels, as well as different needs, they can customize the delivery experience for each and every individual student. A lot of it was previously not even possible, but now with AI technology coming in, a teacher, in past might end up taking bunch of time to do all this work, and many times in reality, it, many times used to be left out. But with AI coming in, we have been able to give that power to a teacher where they can generate that first version, they can look at things, adapt, and then deliver a truly personalized experience for first time in, I would say, after a long time, we have been able to kind of achieve this capability.
And the idea of data is very helpful. It's one that you've all touched upon, right? Whether it's interoperability, whether it's leveraging AI to cut and clean the data. There's so many pieces of data that are in so many different interfaces, right, that everyone's collecting. But we know that's the key to unlocking how to really drive efficacy and efficiency across K-12. So would love to ask the question, just Adrian, how are you using data within your organization? You know, where are you getting it? How are you using it, right? What would you love to be able to do with it?
I swear I did not pay her to ask that question, but that's a great question. I love that question. So, no, I think that, you know, data is key, and I think it's one of those issues where when you reach a certain scale, you can accelerate your impact much, much faster, and that's because of data. So for us, with over 30 million learners and educators on the platform across all of our subjects, we've been using machine learning and data for a very long time. Now with Gen AI, we can do even more. And the interesting thing is people think about AI and you think of the assistant and the chatbot. And yes, our teaching assistant is amazing. Our learner tutor is incredible and using data not just from that session and all of our expert knowledge base, but it's using data from all other science students or history students and teachers and what they did, how they perform, what they're doing, what you should recommend next. How do you differentiate the learning? How do you subgroup your class in ways and then send materials, to your point, that are going to be meeting that learner where they're at. And there's a lot of things that are not just the assistant of what we think today, but it's using data in a way that really that user doesn't see if it's the educator or the student, but it makes the experience much more individualized. It makes them much more custom. The thing I want to bring up though, because my brother Pablo has special needs, and we got to this country when we were in high school, and unfortunately the system hasn't changed very much that he was in back then to today, and I've been very focused on that from an impact perspective. And I want to make sure we don't forget, when we talk about data and AI, don't forget something very important. We're dealing with people. We're dealing with a human issue, and teachers bring other things. It's not about knowledge transfer. The best teachers you've ever had, the best teachers that we've ever met, you ask them, what's your job? And their job is to unlock curiosity, to unlock potential in every single student. They're not telling you they need to learn matrices or they need to do this. Yeah, that's part of it. But it's really about connecting with a student and the love of learning. And, you know, AI is amazing and it's going to do a lot of things and it can, you know, pretend to be human. It can't bring that empathy yet. And I think we gotta make sure that all the tools we're building, all the data we're using, it also finds a way to merge itself with the teachers and the educators in the front line, and that human connection from student to student, teacher to student is really, really critical. We don't forget it. Because we're in an age where data is absolutely gonna advance what we can do for mastery, for knowledge transfer, but we gotta make sure that we keep that student and that human connection in the center of it, or we're gonna lose sight of what's important.
And Adrian, that's a great point, and you bring up two huge trends of how do we support teachers better, and thinking of teachers as the linchpin, because at the end of the day, whether it's a self-service model, it's a asynchronous, or if teachers are supported, the tools are only as good as if they're being used, and the curriculum and the content is only as good as it's being taught faithfully, right, and implemented faithfully. Would love to hear from anyone in the group, right, how you think about that relative to the modalities that you use, the instructional models that you have, right? How do you ensure that you're driving that level of giving teachers freedom, but also making sure the guardrails are there so they are implementing the curriculum, the content in the way that you think is the right way, the most appropriate way to get across to their students?
First of all, I 100% agree with Adrian. What he said is teachers are the one that make the magic happen in the classroom. So we believe no matter what we look at from a technology perspective, AI or not, they need to be in the loop because they, at the end of the day, they are the one that make the difference. So for us, in terms of, we also know teachers don't have enough time. They're strapped for time. They have a lot of things on their plate, and yet they joined the profession because they had a passion for helping kids and for teaching. Today, they spend less than 50% of their time actually being able to teach. So our focus has been really to support those teachers. And just to give a couple of examples in that space is, continuing with the point that Adrian made is, for example, around the data is a teacher dashboard. So the ability for the teacher to see, and understand where each one of her students are, and using in the assessment data and being able to see the student journey. So by clicking in, she will be able to really see where Adrian actually is in his learning journey. So we focus around like the teacher dashboard at point of use. Another example is, again, a lot of teachers are strapped for time. So we try to find ways to support them. An example of this is last year we made an acquisition of Who's Reading, which is an AI-enabled capability. So we launched automatic essay scorer for long form and short form. So what this does for teachers is it really gives them the ability to automate that. That doesn't mean they cannot look at the score, they cannot look at the essay, but they actually are able to make adjustments to the grading. But it really gives them more time to use that as a differentiation tool. Another example of that. A third one, and another example I would like to share is teachers like to collaborate. And therefore, one of the other capability we have is we have the ability for teachers across district to share, we call it playlist, to share their lesson plans, and as well as resources they curate and are able to collaborate across the board among themselves. So these are just few examples. We try to support teachers so that they're able, at the end of the day, bring in the love of learning and install the love of learning in students.
If I may add, I think that role of teacher, which we all highlighted, becomes so important because teacher is at that center of the class, and each day the class is different, each student is different, even different day, that same class ends up acting differently. And how do you give teacher the right flexibility so that they can bring, knowing the mood of the class, they can bring in the right lesson plan so that it actually reaches to the student? Because if students are not engaged, probably whatever you are teaching falls flat. So that, I would say, has been, like, at least for us, a core focus, where how do we make sure that teacher has the flexibility to adjust the content so that it reaches to each and every student, but then also deliver it in a way where kids actually enjoy. Because if a student is actually applying and giving their best, that's the time when you get the right data. And then you can make more sense of it. So when we think about the different modularity and experiences, we all definitely keep that flexibility as well as the student experience in mind, because we believe that's so critical to, in fact, even generate the right data points on which then will be driving a lot of, I'll say, conclusions.
Very interesting. I'm going to take a step back because one of the underlying things that we've talked about collectively is just this is an industry that is extremely slow to change, right? And would love to ask you, James, right? How do you think about affecting change, whether from without or within, right, to drive either a better pace of adoption or willingness to experiment, right? Would love to hear how this panel, starting with you, thinks about driving change in K-12.
Yeah, I think the previous conversations, one angle to it, meaning I think doing it first and foremost using data, I think, is really important. I think that is one tool we can use to sort of drive a wedge in maybe some of the pushback, if you will, of the establishment that can help. I think the other thing, though, that really can help drive change is thinking about the customer experience. And a lot of times when we think about education, we think about the assessment, or we think about the outcome, or we think about the platform. But actually, for the student itself, for the customer, it's actually the experience that we have to provide that will engage them to get to those outcomes. And I think often we're not thinking about using the data to create an individualized experience. And listen, we all believe that teachers are at the heart of education. But a teacher also has a limitation on how they could deliver that individualized experience. A teacher standing in front of a classroom of 30 kids can't individualize an experience at the beginning of the day for 30 different kids. Some of those kids, have a different learning curve. Some of them have family issues. I always like to remind people, like, people in audiences like this, the vast majority of us, we have a privilege that 80% of the country doesn't have. And so 80% of the country, those kids are dealing with things often in their home lives that we have to think about when we deliver that customized experience to the customer. So from my perspective, at least, a lot of like providing the change in education is actually, in some respects, thinking less about the education and thinking more about the customer experience side. Because finding 10 new assessment questions to a math problem isn't going to help the customer experience. Finding ways to engage with the student to actually take the 10 questions, to actually pay attention to the lesson. I think that's really, and I think a lot of the technology that we're seeing today is on the cusp of being able to do that in a way that's never really been done before. And so a lot of the data that we can gather today is going to help allow us to develop technologies that, if we do it right, will actually engage the customer more, meaning the student will enter into an environment where it's hopefully not just incumbent upon a teacher standing in front of a classroom compelling the kids to pay attention. That's really hard. You walk into any classroom today with a teacher standing in front, and if you just literally looked at the 30 kids, most of them are not engaged. So we actually have to solve that problem, I think. And I think a lot of it has to do with thinking about the experience from a customer standpoint. How can we think about the customer engagement side of this, not just the educational academic side of this? There's a customer there that we have to figure out. And I think that the technologies can help us do that, the data can help us do that, but we actually, I do think, we have to step back a little bit from the academic side. I know that's a little bit heresy in a room like this, at a conference like this, with a bunch of educators in front of me, but we actually do think we have to step back from the actual educational side of education.
Adrian, thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting the way that I think about it, and we have a unique perspective because on our platform we sell to schools and districts, but also we started and we still have a very large direct-to-consumer model. So a lot of our subscribers are students and parents, but about a quarter of our subscribers are teachers. Now, you know what teachers make. I don't have to tell this audience that. To pull out a credit card and pay yourself for something, that better be making a difference, or you're not doing that. I mean, not with what teachers makes in this country, and I'm not going to get into that right now because we'll not get off of it. But that's another panel. But I think it gives us a unique perspective because it talks about the customer, and we have insight on what the learners need and how they work, and what the educators need and how it works. That is different actually than when you're talking to the district, and we talk to a lot of them, and over 12,000. But what they look at it tops down, and to keep the customer at the center, in my mind, they're both parts of the equation of customer, and they have different needs. And I think that's part of the thing. When a district or school demands something top down get adopted, what's the adoption rate on that? How much does it actually get used? What's the efficacy at the end of the day? When it's bottoms up and you have that buy-in because you listened to the customer, you understood the outcomes you had to drive, that actually creates usage, creates impact, creates outcomes. So I think you got to change it, not just from the tops down, but to really change the system, it's got to come bottoms up. We have a unique view because we're across that and we see both sides of it. But the other thing I wanna mention is why is this important, right? Why? So teachers don't have time, they're strapped, the system they're stuck in creates challenges because we're teaching in a classroom in front of 30 kids the same way we did 200 years ago. Why is that a problem? Well, a big part of the problem is within 5 years, teachers leave the profession. Now, for teachers of color, that number is down to 3. If you look at some of the research from Latinos for Education or the Center for Black Educators, the numbers are getting worse. Not only we have a teacher shortage problem in this country, we have a diversity problem in this country, and the pipeline isn't looking any better. One of our initiatives, Keys to the Classroom, is focused exactly on that problem. And we just partner with the official partner with ETS we launched actually this week a free AI-driven praxis prep, specifically that on our data has not only a 92% pass rate, but a 60% higher pass rate for test takers of color to address this issue. But if we don't fix the system they're in and the reasons that they don't have time and they get burned out, it doesn't matter how many new teachers we get in we're not going to be able to support all the kids, and especially the 80% you talked about that don't have the privilege we have. And they need those educators that look like them, that understand them, that relate to them, see themselves in their teacher, to see their future. So it's a much larger problem, I agree, than just the academics.
And we've got 4 minutes left. So we've all been on this stage multiple times. We're dating ourselves. And we've been asking the same questions for the last 10 panels that we've been sitting on together. I would love, you just brought up some really great points around how to scope the problem, how to think about the problem. But Bethlam and Ankit, I would love to ask you, what are the questions that we should be asking that we're not asking, right? Because we come up here and we talk about the same thing every year, and I know we're making incremental small change, and short of paying teachers the way they should be right? What else, what are we not asking that we should be asking?
So I can share, like, I feel there's a lot of obsession and talk about the output. We talk about the test scores, they're probably at all-time low at this point. We are always maybe obsessing more on the output variables. However, I do believe there's an opportunity for us to maybe look way more closely and look at what are the inputs which are going in. I think I completely agree with both of you on your thoughts around how do we bring that teacher to that driver's seat? How can we empower them and give them the right opportunity so that the inputs itself get solved. And I believe if there's a switch more on and obsession more on how can we provide the right inputs in the system, I feel the results would follow. So my maybe request would be that as a society, as a system, can we start looking more on the input side versus obsessing too much on the outputs?
Very interesting. Bethlam?
So 2 things, and one is, I just have to say it, we got to pay our teacher more. So, and I think you and I are on the same agreement. We got to pay them more. I mean, teachers are simply not paid enough. That's a whole other panel. We got to address that. If you're trying to retain and attract talent, you got to pay them more. The median salary for teacher in this country is $41,770. That does not work. They are in charge of the future of this country. And we cannot do that. So that is just on the
Sorry,
side.
Bethlam, pay them more, and as you were saying earlier, make their jobs easier. It's both. If there's 2 sides to that coin. I think you were pointing that earlier.
But we gotta be able to attract and retain because their role is so important. The second thing is, and this is just a whole. I know we have 2 minutes. So the other question I think we're not asking is college for all working? Should we rethink that model, the single pathway model, where either you do AP or goes, different pathways? Maybe we need to think about helping in kids as they transition from high school into college and career readiness. We need to give them all the options on the table. Are you going to go to college, and what are your options? How do we alleviate, frankly, some of the massive debt? First of all, kids are not ready when they enter into college. We're not giving them enough insight and giving them the opportunity to kind of test what college curriculum and what's expected when you're in college. So the notion of this growing dual enrollment, dual credit we're seeing, to be able to receive credit for college when you are in high school, therefore alleviating your cost of college to your parents, that is important. 1.5 million kids today are in the dual enrollment and dual credit. We need to be able to communicate that to teachers, to administrators, to parents, so therefore so we reduce the burden, frankly, of going to college and allow that.
There's a whole other panel for that.
There's a whole other
You just
panel.
invited yourself onto. No, thank you all to the guests. Candidly, this was way more interactive than we all hoped it would be for 35 minutes. We did great. We very much appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights, and more than that, we appreciate all the good work that you and your teams are doing on behalf of the students and the teachers that are out there. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.